Alrighty, good morning, guys. So yesterday we introduced this idea of radian measure. Remember, it's essentially just a different unit for measuring angles. So where we used to have degree measure, now we have radian measure. We said a few important facts. One, that pi radians is exactly equal to 180 degrees. And then we used that to convert back and forth between degrees and radians. Hopefully you practiced that and are feeling comfortable with that. What we want to do today is talk about how we can determine function values for angles that are given in radian measure. It's going to be the same thing as determining the function values for angles that are in degree measure. We just have to maybe convert the radian measure back to degrees until we get comfortable with radian measure, and hopefully then you'll be able to just find the function values straight from your memory, right? We're going to memorize all the function values. We've already memorized the first 15. Today we're going to add the other 15 for the reciprocal values, and then look at how we deal with them in radian mode. So let's look at one right here, sine of pi over 3. So the first thing I would suggest is convert your angle back to degrees, and then do it the same as we've been doing it all the previous week or two. Convert angle to degrees. So, and then find the function value. So if we had pi over 3, for example, and this is a radian measure. Yesterday we learned to convert from radians to degrees. I would multiply by 180 over pi. Remember, we're trying to get rid of pi, so we'll multiply by pi in the denominator. They'll cancel. We also cancel a common factor of 3. That leaves 60 degrees. So what we see is sine of pi over 3 would be exactly equal to sine of 60 degrees. And we know from our chart that the exact function value, without using a calculator, right? Chart, no calculator. Our exact function value for sine of 60 degrees, and you're all saying together, is the square root of 3 over 2. So we know then that the sine of pi over 3 is equal to the square root of 3 over 2. Piece of cake. Okay. Now what we want to look at is what would the secant of pi over 6. So these function values are all going to work the same way as they did in degrees. Secant, you'll remember, is the reciprocal of cosine. So this really is just 1 over cosine of pi over 6. So we just need to find cosine of pi over 6, then flip the fraction. So let's do this separately. Cosine of pi over 6. Well, we can convert pi over 6 to degrees first. Pi over 6 times 180 over pi would be equal to, we cancel the pi's, cancel the 6, leaves 30, would be equal to 30 degrees. And hopefully you're going to start recognizing these special angles, 0, 35, 45, 60, 90. We're going to talk about those in a minute. But hopefully we want to start recognizing the special angles. Pi over 6 is one of those special angles. So cosine of pi over 6 is equal to cosine of 30. And we all know from our chart that cosine of 30 is the square root of 3 over 2. So that's not what the question asked, though. The question asked for secant of pi over 6. So secant of pi over 6 is equal to the reciprocal of cosine of pi over 6, or the reciprocal of square root of 3 over 2, which would just be 2 over the square root of 3. We could leave that as our answer, or we can rationalize it, would be a good idea. Multiplying the square root of 3 over the square root of 3 gives us 2 square roots of 3 over 3. And so secant of pi over 6 equals 2 square roots of 3 over 3. So if you were to take all of our 5 special angles, we can convert all 5 of them into radian measure, right? So this would be degrees in this column. This is a little bonus nugget. And we would multiply it by For converting to radians, we'd multiply by pi over 180, and we'd get 0 radians. So in degrees and radians, 0 is 0. 0 is 0 no matter what our unit. If we said 30 degrees times pi over 180, we just had that conversion back here. We saw 30 corresponds to pi over 6, and so on. And if we keep going through all 5 angles, our conversions would show that 45 degrees is pi over 4, 60 degrees is going to be pi over 3, and we saw this yesterday, that 90 degrees is pi over 2. So the angles that filled out our chart in degrees correspond to these angles here in radians. So in our chart that we have memorized, we have our top row is 0, 30, 45, 60, and 90. But now we're going to memorize that chart in radians as well. So in radians, we'd see that the top angles are 0, pi over 6, pi over 4, pi over 3, and pi over 2, right? 30, 45, 60, and 90. So one of the things I'm going to have you guys do today is go through and fill in this chart. So what I want you to do is work through each function value piece by piece. So find the cosine of 0, find the cosine of pi over 6, and so on. Once you fill in the top half, the bottom half should be pretty straightforward because we know cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. So we just take 1 over sine. So cosecant of pi over 6 would be the reciprocal of sine of pi over 6. In other words, 2 over 1, or 2. Okay, so that's the one exercise I want you guys to do today, is go through and fill out the entire chart. And just to make sure we don't all accidentally fill it out incorrectly, there is a completed chart here, but I want you, or it will be filled in once I've finished this video, but I want you to focus on, just copy the blank chart into your notebook or write it down on your notebook and fill in the blank chart and see if you can work through all those function values on your own, and then check against the completed chart that's in OneNote to make sure you have it correct, because the next thing that's going to happen is tomorrow you will have a quiz on this chart right here. All 30 trig function values need to be memorized. For tomorrow, you will have a quiz on all 30 trig function values, and the angles will be given in radians. I won't shuffle them yet, but we need to have all of those memorized for tomorrow. So you already have the top half memorized, and the bottom half is just flipping them upside down. Just work on trying to simplify those fractions and rationalizing denominators and so on. Okay. The reciprocal of 0 is undefined. The reciprocal of undefined number is 0, just for a friendly reminder. Okay, so you'll be working on filling that chart in later today, and then we're going to also talk about how to use the calculator here in just a minute.